let's get started. It's 1:15, and we have 45 minutes. So maybe some people will enter coming from the main stage session. Welcome. My name is Martin Moy. I'm the project manager at the Dutch Green Building Council. I will give a short introduction, and you can click on the slides. You can enlarge the slides by double-clicking on the frame. As I said, we only have 45 minutes, and we have 3 lectures, 2 speakers, so there's not much time available for questions, but still you can ask them, of course, in the Q&A box, and we'll try to answer during the session by typing or otherwise after the sessions later on. And the sessions will be available anyhow next week. I'm from the Dutch Green Building Council. I'm mainly working on a Paris Proof program. We had a session on that yesterday, and a commitment which we handed over to EU Vice President Frans Timmermans. This is one of the DGMB programs. Others are Circularity. That's where the session will be about today. Health and Wellbeing and Climate Adaptation. And in the Circularity program, we have 9 or 7 main partners that sponsor us in this program. A short introduction of what we're doing on circularity. The first one, and this will be in the parts later on by the French Ministry, is on the connection between Paris Proof. So that's our program on operational energy to embodied energy, to whole carbon. So to include the footprint of the building process in the total footprint of a building. But there's more to say about circularity. Some years ago, we published a framework on circularity. This holistic approach. It's available in English, and there you can read all the topics we discovered and we highlighted, and we're working on some of the topics. So one of them is design for disassembly. We published a report on this. It's also available. We're working on material passports, so we already have a credit on flexible design. We had this already in BREEAM for quite a while. So the credits, the criteria we have now are included in the latest manual of BREEAM New Construction, which is published this summer and will go live next year, or by the end of this year. And we are already working with life cycle assessments from the start. And I think the others will come back on life cycle assessments and the situation in their country. So the program today, the session will be moderated by Stephen Richardson of the World Green Building Council, and we have 4 speakers from France, Germany, and someone from the industry, Mark Bosmans from Knauf International. So now over to Stephen, and I will stop sharing my slides.
Thank you, Martin. It's a great pleasure to join you this afternoon now, and to moderate this session. It's a really important and I think increasingly important topic, circularity. So great to have these fantastic speakers and to hear what's going on across the world, across Europe, on this topic. We recognise that the Netherlands is definitely a pioneer in the circularity space. It's fantastic to see some of the work that the Dutch Green Building Council have been leading. Thank you for mentioning some of those initiatives, Martin. But yes, the idea of the international stream of this conference is to shed light on what's going on elsewhere outside of the Netherlands. So we're delighted to have Michael Thierry from the French Ministry for Ecological Transition, and I will hand straight over to him to talk about the work that the French government has been doing on the E+C- program, and to introduce that to us and share some of their experiences. So, Michael, thank you for joining us. If you could share your slides, and we'll move straight on to your presentation.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for the invitation. So I will share my presentation. Let's go. So my presentation will deal with environmental issues in France related to the building sector. I will discuss to you about implementation steps, and more particularly, I will highlight the preparation and implementation of the environmental regulation framework from new buildings, which will be put into practice in 2021. So in France, the building sector is very important because it contributes to a 44% of consumed energy and 25% of greenhouse gas emission from the conception of buildings. We don't take into account here the embodied footprint related to the construction steps. The construction sector also in France represents more than 200 megatons of waste per year. What about the ambitious national goals? In France, we are committed to tackle global warming. It has put in place, France has put in place an ambitious strategic plan related to different laws. There is the law on green building growth in 2016, the low carbon strategy in 2019, which goal is to reach net carbon neutrality in 2050, and more recently, the anti-waste law for a circular economy in 2020. Regarding circular economy, in France, in line with the Paris Agreement, the French Prime Minister presented in April 2018 a roadmap for circular economy. This roadmap is a result of substantial consultation with stakeholders. This roadmap led to the anti-waste law in 2020, which include several measures in order to limit waste and contribute to the transition to a circular economy. So here I will develop three steps, three measures related to the anti-waste law: the creation of an extended responsibility of the producer, the revision of the pre-demolition waste audit, and the creation of a tracking document for works outside the perimeter of the waste audit. So first, the extended responsibility of the producer. An article of the anti-waste law for a circular economy requires implementation of an extended producer responsibility system applied to building waste, such as the one which exists in France for electrical and electronic equipment waste, for instance. The French Environment and Energy Management Agency, ADEME in French, is in charge of a preparatory study in view of the implementation of these measures to extend the producer responsibility. This extension of the producer responsibility will be put into practice in January 2022. As this kind of other systems similar to the one that we will have in the building sector, it would be managed by eco-organism. This eco-organism would receive euros contribution from companies that put construction products on building materials on the French market, be in charge of promoting eco-design through a modulation of fees, be in charge of collecting the waste at different collection points, be in charge of setting up a system for the traceability of materials, also be in charge of disposal of building waste in different garbage dumps. Several points need to be clarified now. The list of products which are exactly concerned by this extension of the responsibility of the producer, the contribution amount imposed, the different contribution amount imposed for each product, and the other issue is a territorial grid of collection points. The second measures of the anti-waste law is the mandatory pre-demolition waste audit. So these pre-demolition waste audits exist already in France, but it has to be improved to be more applied, more respected. So the circular economy laws changes by moving towards an approach which address the reuse and recovery of resources. And in order to improve the quality of the pre-demolition waste audit, several measures have been taken into account. Extension of the obligation to large renovations, not only renovation which have an impact to the structure of the buildings, but more generally renovations. We consider that this audit will be mandatory for surfaces for area, the floor area more than 1,000 square meter. We define more precisely the competencies of the operators who can realize the pre-demolition audit. We include an assessment of the potential reuse in the pre-demolition audit. And we impose to send the pre-demolition audit to an organism named by the state able to collect the information. For smaller renovation projects below this threshold of 1,000 square meters of floor area, the law puts into practice a tracking document for works outside the waste audit perimeter in order to improve the traceability of construction and demolition waste, as a tracking document is now compulsory for works which has an emission of waste. This document is delivered to the work company by the person in charge of the collection point where the waste has been deposited. My presentation now will turn to the preparation of the environmental regulation, new environmental regulation for new buildings. So since 2010, 3 different laws have introduced for new construction the principle of an environmental regulation on the goal of net zero energy buildings. As a result, the French Building Code, the regulation, plans that in 2020, there will be requirements on building carbon footprint based on the life cycle analysis. And also, the law says that we have to take into account the carbon storage during the building life. The law also plans requirements on the use of products from renewable resources like bio-based materials, the use of recycling materials, and also requirements related to indoor air quality. In order to prepare the future environmental regulation for 2020, France launched in 2016 a national trial, a national experimentation for new construction called E plus C minus, energy plus carbon minus. And since the end of 2018, complementary technical works and consultation of the stakeholders were carried out. This trial was based on 3 main tools. First, an assessment framework, which is the same for all the stakeholders to have representative results. So it describes the way to realize the life cycle analysis, a label to make the promotion of the most ambitious projects, and a database to collect information. Today, more than 1,000 buildings have been assessed and put into the database by project owners in the whole country. Most of these projects correspond to residential buildings, but we have more than 100 buildings, which are offices, schools, and different kinds of tertiary sector buildings. In addition to the trial phase, E plus C minus, some technical works were launched at the end of 2018 on 15 different subjects to improve the method of life cycle analysis, like the building life cycle analysis parameter, the way to take into account carbon storage, the way to take into account the summer thermal comfort. 1 year later, thanks to the results of those studies and the feedbacks of the trial phase, we modified the assessment method in order to improve it. At the beginning of this year, case studies were carried out on residential buildings, office buildings, and schools in order to begin to fix the future requirement levels that we will have in the regulation. Along those 2 years of works, many consultation of stakeholders were organized. Today, the writing of the environmental regulation is about to end, but only for the categories I have listed, the main categories, the residential categories, and also the main tertiary buildings. The other categories of buildings will be added next year. In this future regulation, we have 5 major objectives for this new environmental regulation. The first objective is a reduction of the climate impact of the new building. This implies taking into account the carbon emission of the building over its life cycle, entire life cycle. So it takes into account the embodied footprint of the buildings, promoting the use of construction method that emits little carbon or allow carbon to be stored, for instance, bio-based materials, and promote also the consumption of decarbonated energy sources, for instance, renewable heat. The second objective is to have a better energy performance and lower consumptions in comparison to the current regulation. The name of this regulation is RT 2012. So the idea is to be more efficient than this regulatory. The third objective is to adapt housing to future climate conditions. For instance, to take into account summer comfort, but also to take into account heat wave episodes. The fourth objective is to ensure a good indoor quality in buildings. And the last objective is to promote products from reuse and recycling. We will do that by the method of life cycle analysis to reduce the impact, of course, of this kind of reused materials or equipment, for instance. Technically, when we perform the life cycle analysis in the regulatory framework, the designer will have to assess the project through some specific softwares for energy calculation and for life cycle analysis. These softwares will be linked to the database INES, which is a database which is very important to provide the EPDs and the data, the environmental data which is necessary to build the life cycle analysis. Those softwares will produce a standardized file that sums up all the results of the assessment that can be dropped in the national database and generate a conformity certificate. For the building life cycle analysis, different data can be used and will be used. Environmental products declaration, the EPDs, of construction products and equipment, default values, substitutes when there is no EPDs for the products chosen in the project for the life cycle analysis, and fixed values for the calculation of the environmental footprint of the construction of the consumption of energy of the buildings. All these data are gathered in the French database called INES. So thank you very much for your attention on your presentation. We are 2 people who can help you if you have some questions, myself and Brigitte Jacquemont, and the emails are provided here. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you, Michael, for that really interesting presentation. And we already have a question, somebody requesting to get a copy of your. I assume, Martin, that slides will be available somewhere on the event webpage. Is that?
Yes, that's from.
Yes, my presentation can be shared.
The videos on the website or on YouTube, and we can because the slides.
Fantastic.
Are sometimes somewhat small.
And I can.
With your approval, of course.
Yes, and I confirm that the presentation can be shared.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Okay, wonderful. So we've heard there from the policy perspective, the government perspective. We're very fortunate to have a number of different perspectives for you today in these presentations. So we'll move on now to Christine Ruiz from the DGMB, the German Sustainable Building Council. Christina is a program manager at DGMB, working on specializing on circularity. So she's going to talk us through what they, as an NGO, as an association, are doing in this space, and how they're helping to lead the transition to circularity in Germany. So Christina, over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Stephen. So it was actually very nice to see the developments in France, because we have several similar developments here in Germany, but I will talk on that. So now I would like to give you a short overview on what we do as the German Sustainable Building Council in order to promote the topic of circular economy in the construction sector in Germany, but also beyond, and present some different tools and resources we prepared to approach and implement the circular economy. So just a very brief presentation of the DGMB. As a non-profit organization, we aim to identify and promote sustainable building solutions, and we do so via, let's say, 3 pillars. So we sensitize the general public, and we address our network, our members and experts in the sustainable construction. Then we share and gather knowledge. We train on sustainable buildings, and we provide a knowledge platform for sustainable buildings. And we translate sustainability into practice through our certification system. And I would like to present you what we are actually doing regarding circular economy in these 3 pillars. So addressing our network, as a registered association, we try to promote circular economy, really bring it into the broad knowledge of the public. So we communicate the advantages of a circular built environment by participating in events and conferences, in the current discussions ongoing on circular economy. Then we foster and promote innovative and circular solutions. Just yesterday, we had our DGMB Sustainability Challenge, where we ask projects to present their innovative solutions. And actually, one of the winners was a research project in reuse and recycling. So we try to really raise awareness on the circularity topic whenever it's possible. And we strengthen the political anchoring of circular economy on the national, but also on EU level. So we participated in the development of the EU reporting format levels. And as a partner, we are also in the research project Life Levels with 7 other European GBCs, like the Dutch Green Building Council, and also France. ASHCO is one of our partners in the consortium. So this is what we do in order to promote circular economy really within our network. Then we think it's really crucial to share and exchange knowledge on circular economy to give a broad understanding. And we try to really foster a common understanding of what is circular economy, and also to provide practical tools for the implementation, to really get from the knowledge level to the next step in the implementation. So we also train and qualify building practitioners along the value chain in construction, but we also share a lot of free knowledge. For example, last year we published a report on circular economy where we highlight its relevance within the construction sector. And it provides a lot of background information on how to close the loops, and where to start, because we set a strong focus on the topic design for conversion and deconstruction, which we think is one of the key levers to actually close the loops in the construction sector. So we provide some practical tools for implementing circular economy, and we transfer these tools into an online toolbox, which is also available in English. So you can find strategic field of actions, challenges and tasks, and what are the necessary steps for different stakeholder groups. Then we also gathered some practical examples on how really to integrate not only make one circular building, but how to integrate circular economy aspects into actual construction projects, make it more feasible and tangible. So we also provide some checklists for the individual stages of a project to support planners and always help them to always have the circularity topic present in the planning process. These tools are free of charge. We want to disseminate the knowledge, and we want really to exchange on the solutions, and also always love to get feedback in order to improve. Then this relates to what Michael Thierry just said. We also try to get the connections, or to establish a connection between circular economy and all the other relevant topics we are currently discussing about, like the climate change, carbon neutrality, which all have to go hand in hand in order to make the change work. So we just recently published a framework for carbon neutral buildings and sites, where we give a concrete definition of CO2 neutrality. The framework supports players in the construction sector to identify and also implement and plan ahead effective measures for greenhouse gas emissions reduction. And we do that by considering two scopes for accounting of the emissions. One is operation. So we have a look at the building and also at the user. And the emissions from the construction. So we look at the material. And there the framework really highlights the relevance of circular economy for a climate-friendly building construction, because circular construction offers really a very high potential for CO2 reduction and prevention, which is even better. So when planners choose materials and constructive principles supporting circularity, like, for example, design for reuse and recovery, or also the use of already recycled materials, then CO2 emissions can be saved both at the beginning and at the end of life of a building. So we try to integrate circular economy really into every ongoing discussion we are having right now. And then the third field we address circular economy with is making circular construction accessible through certification. Martin has talked about LCA before. There are several aspects that have been integrated in the DGMB certification system from the very beginning, since 2008. It's, for example, the life cycle assessment, the responsible use of resources, and the ease of recovery and recycling in the future. So this is circular economy relevant, and it has always been integrated in the system. Also, the assessment of rather the overall performance instead of individual measures. What we have done in 2018 is we have introduced circular economy bonus points. So it's really making circular economy aspects measurable and accessible throughout the whole life cycle of a building, because we have integrated these bonuses in the different applications from our system. So you can, even in the new construction or buildings in use, and even in the deconstruction, which is our newest application, you can always have a concrete look at the circular economy aspects and really make them count for the certification. Then we have further instruments. I just named them. I won't explain them further, but we are generally trying to support transparency on sustainability and circularity topics, for example, through a recognition of product labels and our database, DGMB Navigator, which makes sustainability qualities of products transparent. So all of these instruments contribute to really raise awareness and transparency regarding circularity. Just two slides on the new certificate for deconstruction of buildings. It's our newest development. It's now in pilot phase. It addresses really the circularity at the end of life stage, in case the further use of the building is really no longer possible. So in order to support closing the loops, where it's actually very important that in the deconstruction projects, there is where the material flows have to be closed. So we find it important not only to plan ahead for deconstruction in the future, which is also very important, but also to address what is going on now in the deconstruction sector. So the certificate sets really strong incentives to close the material flows, for example, through reuse and recycling, to promote a higher value of the building stock, and also to close the loop between the deconstruction and the new construction, for example, by reusing components. So really to establish solutions in line with the circular economy. So deconstruction is always seen like the thing we should not do. So how can it actually become more sustainable or circular? The certificate really focuses on providing transparency and also securing the value of resources which are still there at the end of life of a building. So 2/3 of the criteria directly aim at promoting circularity aspects and really closing the loops, like reuse and recycling. We have a close look at the recycling path and the transport distances, how are hazardous substances separated from the rest, and so on. And also it has a strong focus on improving current deconstruction processes to make them more circular and foster really closing the loops. So I want to finish actually with a call for action for all of us to start implementing circularity today. I think really every small and large step counts, every individual project counts, and also it's very important to experiment and to learn from each other, to share our knowledge and work together as we do within the green building councils in Europe to really build strong partnerships in order to achieve our common goals. So that would be it from my side, and I'm happy to further exchange with you and answer any questions you might have.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. And what a fantastic call to action there, and segues or leads beautifully into our final presentation from Mark Bosmans from Knauf Insulation. Mark will be telling us about what Knauf Insulation is already doing, and hopefully that will give us some inspiration of how others who've joined can follow their example and yeah, hopefully build some more of that collaboration that you're speaking about there, Christina. So Mark, we can see your slides, so over to you.
Good, thank you, Stefan. Yeah, what I want to present you today is the view of a manufacturer on this topic, and you will see that it relates quite directly to what we just have seen before. I'll briefly explain our company because you will see that it has an influence on how we live circular economy. I'll try to show you what we did in the past, what we do this year, where are we, and how do we look to our future. If we look to Knauf Insulation, it's a family-owned business. It's a family name. We have 85 years of experience in manufacturing, and that has quite some influence. The fact that we are completely family-owned, we are not on the stock market. That means also that on certain topics we can have a slightly more long-term perspective. If we look to Knauf Insulation, the insulation part of Knauf, we have more than 40 years of experience, 27 plants in 15 countries, a lot of employees. How we work, and that is very important for us, we live under the principles of challenge, and we challenge each other, we challenge the status quo, and you'll see that we've done that in circular economy also. We create, and when we talk about creating, it's about finding innovative solutions. It's about entrepreneurship, which is really part of the core values of our company. And it's also about taking care of people and taking care of our planet. And you'll see that that's something also that is already in our vision since quite a long time, because you will find there that it ends with the for a better world, which is something that many people live within our company, being it in the people managing topics like sustainability, but also the people on the shop floor. When I talk about insulation, may be important, we always think about thermal insulation, but we also see that it's about acoustics, fire, and the health. And I'll come back to that health and that indoor air quality, to which Michael Thierry also hinted at a certain moment. Our sustainability approach is not something new. It's something we started in 2010. You'll see that I shifted it in two parts, our sustainability approach and the role of circular economy. I know that there is a big confusion between these different terms, but I find it important that we can separate and show what is belonging where. If we look to our 2010-2020 sustainability strategy, we set ourselves 8 objectives, of which 5 had a target. We achieved 4 of these 5 targets by 2020. The only one we missed is, and that's an interesting one, is the one that is related to circular economy, which was about how many waste we sent to landfill from our factories. And that's the one you can find on the left top, where our objective was to come to 0%, and then we still ended up at 30%. of our initial value in 2010, and I'll come back later to that. You've seen that on the other ones, we achieved quite a lot of things. The interesting part for us as a company is that in 2010, we clearly focused on everything which is related to our own production processes. You see that of these 8 indicators, all are focused on ourselves. If we look to the role of circular economy, and Michael Thierry and Christine Ruiz already hinted to that. When you work in the construction sector, it's not just you as a manufacturer, it's the whole value chain. It's about your own manufacturing waste, which I was showing, but it's also about waste during production. It's about reuse of products. It's about deconstruction, which Christine mentioned. So we clearly acknowledged already in 2010, because this picture dates from that period, that we are part of that bigger value chain, but we struggled to see which role we could play in the larger value chain. And I'll come back on how we look to that now in 2020 later. What we focused on was, as I said, is our own production. It's something which is in our DNA. Here you have the main material that we use for glass mineral wool, which is glass cullet. It's broken glass bottles. We achieve in quite some factories to use up to 80% of our raw materials is this glass cullet, which avoids us to need to use other raw materials. But it's a day-to-day challenge to have access to that material, because there is more and more competition for it, even leading us in a situation, for example, in the UK, where we co-invested with Veolia in a cullet production factory. I said to you that on circular economy, we had one major objective, which was to avoid that any waste that comes out of our factories would go to landfill. Here you see what we achieved between 2012 and 2017 on our Belgian site, where you see that we achieved minus 70% in waste volume, which is quite significant, but which was the easy part. The overall 28%, which are still resting, there are the one where we need to find partnerships, or we'll need to look to other factories, other industries to help us. We already said that there was a link, for example, with other elements, and I want to explain you something about ECOS. Already before our sustainability program, we came up with ECOS, which is a revolutionary binder technology. And the reason we did it was, well, first of all, because we could use a binder which was based on renewable materials, but also because it had lower embodied carbon, lower embodied energy, which is what we were referring to when we were talking about life cycle assessments, but also for us, and that was one of the most important ones, it had a better indoor air quality, and it was a softer material to work with. Where are we today? Quite interestingly, I wanted to first show in which kind of environment we function. We look to both construction and deconstruction, because these are the two places where waste is produced in our value chain, which are the other parts than our own factories. We have some pressure from the market. We are more and more contacted by construction and deconstruction companies to see which role we can play in managing their waste streams. And we have also quite some initiatives coming up from legislators, of which France and Michael Thierry already showed you an important one, and that's the one you find on the left side with the extended producer responsibility, which comes up in 2022. But we see, for example, that in Italy, to just name one, we have now minimum requirements on recycled content. We see also in the Netherlands quite some initiatives popping up, and also at the European level. I think it's interesting as an industry to see that the legislators are following, or even on some topics are leading the way. For us as a manufacturer, one of the big challenges is that we are confronted more and more with, also at the regional or at the very local level, with different initiatives, new types of databases, new types of product passports, and that really becomes a challenge to fill them all in. So we are looking to legislators at the national level, or even at the European level, to harmonize this. What we have set up is, for example, in the Netherlands, the Recycle Club. We sell our glass mineral wool to the prefab industry, where we also deliver them a baler, and they pay a monthly fee for that baler. They put the offcuts of their prefab glass mineral wool in the baler, and we can take it back, and then it goes to recycling. And that's very nice because we can offer that service to our customer. And at the same moment, it gives us the possibility to have that material recycled. In France, in Belgium, in the Netherlands, we also started with a pellets return service. We are offering that service for free to our customers. Once they have more than 40 pellets, they can call a service. The pellets are collected, are sent to a reparation site, so where the pellets can are checked, are repaired if necessary, and then are sent back to our factory so that we can use them again. And the expansion is really foreseen to have it in other countries also quite rapidly. What we are working on, and that's really something that we pilot, is to see how we can work with construction waste and deconstruction waste, recycling after take back in our factories for construction waste. So we take it back and we send it to recycling routes. Deconstruction waste is what we call the next challenge. It's clearly the largest potential. That's where we have a big amount of waste, but that's also where we will need to work in partnership with our value chain. And I think that's how I want to end, is how do we look to the future? Well, as a company, we clearly realize that we need to expand our horizon. We were very good in factory improvements. Now we need to go to a value chain improvements. As our plant manager in Belgium says, it's all about maintaining and building strong partnerships. Buildings are no fast-moving consumer goods, and that's for us a really interesting one, because it means that today, from a circular economy perspective, our challenge is the buildings that we will deconstruct in 2050. Earliest, but at the same moment we need to manage the products that have been installed 50 years ago, which were not built and not installed from a circular economy perspective. And that's something for which we clearly want to take our responsibility as a manufacturer. We want to play a role in that, but at the same moment we need to create partnerships with the rest of our value chain, being at deconstruction companies, being at waste handlers, being at construction companies. As a last part done, I showed you our objectives from 2010 to 2020. So that means that we have new sustainability strategy coming up, which will help us also to create goals for a better world. It will be launched mid of October 2020. I can already tell you that one of the 4 pillars on which it will be built will be about circular economy, with I hope some objectives and I know some good objectives to be achieved by 2025 on that topic. Thank you.
Thank you for that inspiring presentation, Mark. Yeah, great to see what Knauf is doing. And we just have a couple of minutes left. So rather than open up to lots of questions, which I don't think we have time, I'd like to just pick up on this one of the questions in the chat box, which is about the differences between different countries, and this stream is about the international sort of collaboration, international exchange. So I wonder just a final thought from each of the 3 of you, if you don't mind, on what do you think are the key lessons that that other countries can take from the example that you've shared, from the experiences you've had, the barriers you've faced. What would be your one key takeaway to share with our audience today? So if I could ask Mikael to perhaps address that question first, if that's all right.
Oh, sorry, I had a problem with my microphone.
It's okay. We hear you now. Did you hear the question? Would you like me to repeat the question?
The question on the chat. What you mean?
Yeah. So I was just trying to extract that into a question to all of you. Yeah. Just your key takeaway in terms of what should other countries learn from your experience?
From the French experience.
Yeah.
what is important to learn is how to define the perimeter of the life cycle analysis. There are different ways to define the perimeter of the life cycle analysis. It depends on what you take into account. Do you stay just at the scale of the building, or do you take into account, for instance, the garden or other things that you have around the buildings? That's very important to define precisely what you want at the beginning before launching calculations, because if you want to compare the results between each other, it's important to have always the same framework at the beginning of assessment, because after that it's difficult to compare. Because, for instance, some life cycle analysis tools can include the mobility. For instance, the mobility is very important. It has a huge impact on the carbon footprint, and of course, if you have the mobility impacts, you can change globally the quantification of your carbon impact of your life cycle analysis. So that's a very important point. The other point is the verification of the data, because life cycle analysis is based on, of course, on a lot of data. The data related to the impact of the products, of the equipments, and this is very crucial to have a uniform verification approach of these data. And it is a question that I had in the chat. It's very important to have something uniform between the countries, to share the data between the countries. It's important to be able to accept data from another country, verified, and of course data which are eventually modified to take into account the context of the country, the energy context of the country, the footprint of the energy vectors of the country, the different management approach of the waste in the country. It can change, of course, the life cycle analysis of the products, but globally, the main input related to the production of the products have to be shared between the countries, and that's something very important.
Thank you for that, Michael. Christina, your closing remarks on opportunities to learn from the German experience.
Yeah, maybe really connecting directly to what Michael Thierry just said. I think it's really important that we build strong partnerships and also further foster the exchange, like Martin, like we do in our Life Levels project, where we address the LCA topic and see that what is done in other countries, learn from each other. And really, maybe the second point is to really just start with what we have. So it can always be better. We should maybe not try to make the one circular lighthouse project, but rather start and make small steps and really experiment and learn from each other.
And finally, Mark, what would be your reflections on opportunities to learn across borders and between countries?
Yeah. I think one interesting difference that there is between countries, and it has not been named, but quite important from a circular economy perspective, is that the landfill price, for example, is completely different from one country to another. And that really has influence on the business models that you can build. We have business models which work in certain countries and which don't work in other countries because we can never be competitive with very cheap landfill. I want also to come back on the idea of the harmonization of data. For us as a manufacturer, that is a real challenge, because here we speak about the difference between countries. For us, for example, in the Netherlands, I'm confronted every few weeks with demands from our local teams to fill in all kind of databases, Excel files, to have your products selected from a circular economy perspective. And that's a double, it's administrative burden, but also it is everywhere based on different systems, which means that you even don't have a possibility to optimize on the longer term your products towards something which is considered as a circular. So that creates a lot of uncertainty. At the same moment, I think as an industry, it's interesting to see how much things are evolving, how fast things are evolving on circular economy, which is completely different than what we could have imagined 2 to 3 years ago. So it's good that there are trials, it's good that things are tested. For us as a manufacturer, maybe copy from each other, from countries when things have been stabilized. We have today, for example, Michael Thierry presented the challenge of the extended producer responsibility on construction products. I think that's something that will face quite some challenges, quite some questions. It's good that we answer or try to answer these questions in one country. I would have a lot of difficulties if the 27 member states in Europe would start a similar process in parallel.
Great. Thank you for those final thoughts. Yeah, and thank you to all three of you for really engaging and inspiring presentations. Thank you to our audience. I have just one final thing to say, which is that if you're interested in knowing what is going on at European level on this topic, do join a webinar that we're running tomorrow morning with members of the European Parliament. I'm going to put the link to that in the chat box. And obviously make the most of the other sessions that the Dutch GBC are running as part of this event. So I'll hand back to Martin to close the session. Thank you, everybody.
Yes, thank you, Stephen, and thank you all. And yes, this was exactly what we meant. This webinar to exchange information, and I think we are running into the same discussions and working on the same type of questions. We're already working in the live levels project Christine is mentioning. I think we will do more together in the future, together with our partners, with our members. So it was very brief today, the introduction, but I think we will have some follow-up meetings and hopefully also meet in person in the future. So watch our newsletters and our websites, and we will keep you informed.
Great. Thank you, everybody.
Well, thank you all.
You to all.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.